I was more inspired by like, I want to put bands on a pedestal that deserve the pedestal that no one's seen before. And I want to help create something that's its reputation. Like too many people are just sitting around waiting to be told what to like. And there's not enough people in this industry sticking their neck out saying, you need to like, you need to listen to this.
Kevin, hey, how's it going? Welcome to the Question and the Answers podcast.
Hi, Andy.
Kevin Sur, it has been way too long, my friend. Man, we were just talking about this. Like, I can't really remember the last time that I had a chance to really have an actual face-to-face conversation with you. Yeah. Man.
We think for sure 2007, 2008.
Something like that. Yeah. Cause it was either the time that you had come back down to the Bay Area to do some performances with one of your bands, or it may have been when I had gone up to Seattle to visit some other friends. And I think we met up briefly, but regardless, man, it is great to see your face. I mean, Kevin, you and I go way back. I've known you now since like the late 90s.
Yeah. The late 90s. You're just one of those. Yeah. We go way back and you're always somebody like we were two young people pursuing something kind of insane. And you're always one of the good people that I could trust and rely on and just like be completely, just completely open about the realities and the challenges that we all had, and just somebody that I could share that with, So, and that goes for, and Mel, Liz, Dre, they would all say that. Like you were just someone we trusted and loved. So I'm happy to be here with you.
Thanks, man. No, I mean, the feeling's so mutual. So anyone who is not aware of who this gentleman is, this is Kevin Sur, who for many years was affectionately known as Bubba as well amongst the circle, but goes by Kevin nowadays. And he is a long-time friend, but he played for many years in a band called Luckie Strike, who were like a pop punk band of the Sacramento, California area, and kind of led the charge with that crew for many years. And then after Luckie Strike came to an end, he started another band called Indian Valley Line, which was a little bit more on like kind of like a folk, almost like Americana, indie rock. It blended like a lot of styles. We'll go into like what that band was all about as we dive in. But you did that for a number of years. And I mean, technically, I guess that band isn't really broken up, right?
I guess technically, no.
Yeah.
I mean, we kind of had a shelf life that we knew. And I think that we haven't done squat in a long time, for maybe 10 years. But yeah, I mean, we're technically, we're just three really, really, really close friends. And the things we did were very deliberate for the time that we were doing it. And I would say that it was never a broken up thing, or we weren't trying to pursue anything. So, and we occasionally have chats be like, hey, if you can make it to Portland from, Ben, emo Ben, our drummer, roadie extraordinaire and drummer extraordinaire for like a million bands, but we still talk and we still, occasionally check in to see, and we're all open to doing it. It's just when life allows it, we will.
Sure. No, and that's, I think it's always great to have projects like that where, it isn't bound by a set of rules or like guides that are very strict. It's just more like, you know what, we do this because we love to do it.
Yeah.
And when we can do it, we will. Yeah.
Yeah. And that was like kind of the premise of Indian Valley Line, really. Like Luckie Strike was 7 years of, and I've never worked harder in my life on a thing. And it was being in a band with three other people that we just wanted to play music for a living. That was our life goal. And I'm proud of them and I'm proud of everything we did. And when it ended, it was kind of a huge heartbreak. Um, and so, yeah, like, I mean, there's a whole story behind it, but like I went, at the end of it, I moved to Seattle because it was one of the few places in the country where I didn't really know anyone. We toured so much that pretty much any major city in the United States I can go to, and people would have a preconceived notion of who Bubba was and what kind of music Bubba would be into. I just wanted to go and have a fresh start and figure it out because for so long, it's all I wanted to do. And when that kind of gets taken away from you, you just zero clue, zero clue what I wanted to do. And I moved up to Seattle and started studying music composition. I just wanted to know everything I could about this craft that had led me down the path. I wasn't really into being in a band. I was just wanting to obsess over music and becoming better at music and becoming a better musician. Um, and started studying composition. Moved down to California to finish the music degree and to learn more. But while I was down there, my brain was just going batty.
Mhm.
um, it was a very difficult process. The dictation and ear training, all the stuff that very difficult music school puts you through can make you go kind of insane. And so Emo Ben, Novato Core creator, we were just still on the phone all the time, and I was willing to drive up. And I just told him, I said, "Hey, man, my mind is going absolutely insane doing a lot of these studies and with composition, everything. I just want to be in something where I could be with a friend and play something stupid, just play three chords, catchy, just be dumb and have fun, just pure fun, because I was missing that element." And so me and Ben started playing songs together. He would play standing up, a la Violent Femmes, with just a hi hat and a snare and a crash cymbal, and we just were having the best time, just hanging out and being friends. Like, he was the roadie for Luckie Strike. He was the guy that would stay up all night with me, and we would just have endless conversations about albums, about everything. So it's just a comfortable place to be in with one of your best friends. Um, and then Ryan Lynch, who was a prominent, insane guitar wizard from the North Bay, caught wind that we were just hanging out playing music, and he started showing up and applying his incredible guitar playing to what we were doing. And we just turned into this band that everything about Indian Valley Line, in terms of playing live, touring, all that kind of stuff, it was really the antithesis of what Lucky Strike was trying to do. Lucky Strike were really trying to achieve a career and a dream. And Indian Valley Line was about celebrating all the moments in between. It was about, we would book a 2-week tour to go see an old friend, or we try to find routings that we can tour that we've just never seen before. Um, and it was about the adventure and just being friends. Like, it was literally about just being friends together, going on the road for these little stints, having the best time of our lives, and just enjoying it. Because I think we'd all, aside from Ben, Ryan had also been in a place where we'd been pursuing that career path of being a touring musician. And I think at the end of it, looking back, regretting not just smelling the roses more and enjoying the time you had with your bandmates more, which was one of my big regrets with Lucky Strike, was just, these people are my family. We love each other like family. We are there for each other today more so than we were back then. And I think one of the big lessons that you learn from a band like that, that's been through a ton together, literally lived in a van together, um, that you look back and you're just like, I just wish we had longer conversations, more time, and less time stressed about, the career path, the disappointments, those kind of things. We just enjoyed the fact that we were there at that moment doing the thing we were doing. So that's what Indian Valley Line was, and why, it's primarily three members: Emo Ben, who lives in Novato, California. I live in Seattle, and Ryan Lynch now lives in Portland. So we're in 3 states, but we're still friends, and we've had kids, things like that. but the idea of getting together comes up every year or so. So it'll happen one day.
I hope I'm there when it does, because I mean, Indian Valley Line actually performed at a birthday party of mine one year. That was
Yeah.
really awesome. Yeah.
Yeah.
I loved your guys' music, man. I thought you guys were making really beautiful music. I mean, you know, you've always had this really great, you know, ear for like good songwriting and like what makes a song good. And you know, I personally really love your voice. Your singing voice, I think, is really, really, really awesome. And you nailed it. Like Ryan Lynch's guitar playing is just some of the coolest, most interesting guitar playing I've ever heard. I mean, and that's saying a lot, because I mean, shit, we know there's a million guitar players out there, many of which are amazing.
I've
But
hung out
this
with the
guy,
best, yeah, I've hung out with the best guitar players on the planet, and Ryan is up there. Like I'm talking about Bill Frisell and like Matt Monasteri. Like I've, you know, literally some of the best guitar players in the world, and I don't know if Ryan gives a shit, but like the fact is he is just one of the best guitar players alive, you
I
know.
totally
And
agree. Yeah.
yeah, and it's funny. Yeah, he's just a beast. He's an absolute beast. I mean, it's he, you know, when like Steve, when it came to blues, you know, you had a lot of like very exacting blues players in the 80s. And then Stevie Ray Vaughan came around, who just was not at all in his left brain, just completely heart, feeling every minute of it, and found that thing, that soul of it, that real feeling of playing anything and being in the moment. That's Ryan. But Ryan's from this psychedelic, just rock and roll something where he just and he's a great improviser and a great composer in that regard. And I think when Indie Valley Line came around, it was just this beautiful marriage where I had this composer mind, and I'm thinking of structure and I'm thinking of things as a composition. I was literally writing compositions for orchestra and whatnot. And so I had that mind, and he had this other side of things where I'd have to corral him in a little bit, and he'd open things up a bit. And we found all these great ways where we could play off each other and affect strong song structure and let the guitar speak. You know, there's a lot of moments with Indie Valley Line where there's no singing, but you wouldn't really notice because of the arrangement and because of his playing, you know. Yeah, Ryan Lynch is a treasure.
Yeah. Yeah. And he's just a good person too. Like just a great guy to have around, you know.
Yeah.
And of course, you know, Ben is an awesome guy, great drummer, laying it down.
Yeah.
I mean, we've had tons of great experiences hanging out with Ben as well. So
yeah, for people who don't know Emo Ben is a North Bay legend. Like I think that the way I got to meet him was he was putting on punk shows at his parents' house after school. So like he lived near, I guess, like two different high schools. And so after school on a weekday, he'd have these shows in his house, and his friend, all the punks from like two different schools would just walk to his house, and you and a punk band would play in his living room for like 60 of the coolest kids there were. He ended up being a roadie for us. He ended up taking a lot of photographs of the Bay Area and the punk scene and just being in the know. Personally, he's a great drummer. In a million bands, but personally, if like Emo Ben is he's that guy who's just super nerdy and innocent, but excited about life. But he's just that guy that you know, anyone can bring their troubles to, and Emo Ben will say straight. He's a good guy. So
yeah, no, he really is. So funny story. I the last time I saw him in person, I had just gotten married, and my wife and I had won these tickets to go see the Melvins here in Berkeley.
yeah.
And so it was the day after my wedding, and I was like, I won these tickets. Do you want to go see the Melvins with me? And my wife's like, sure, I guess. And I'm like, you're in for it. And sure enough, I saw Ben there at the show with his partner, girlfriend. I'm not sure. I can't remember if he's married or not. I don't think he's married, but no, it was great to run into him as always. And yeah, I mean, Indian Valley Line. I think you guys have some music still online. I'll definitely add a link to that because everyone can check it out.
Bandcamp page.
But I wanted to kind of backtrack a little bit and talk about your time with Luckie Strike a little bit.
Sure.
So like get I know we touched on it a little bit. Like you guys were from Sacramento, and
Yeah.
you mentioned you guys were together for about 7 years, and you were really trying to make that band into like a legitimate professional band as a career, you know.
Yeah.
And you know, I just gotta say that, you know, you've always been somebody that, you know, back then and even nowadays, like I feel like I can kind of come to and, you know, really be able to get good feedback from you, you know, about like, hey, like, do you think this is working? Or like, what do you think about like the way to like best do this? Or like, you know, what's going on with like the music business? Like you've always kind of had that head on your shoulders. Um, you know, out of your experience with Lucky Strike and like during that time, what do you think drove that? Like, what do you think like made you want to really be like that person that was just like gonna be like the person who like knew all this stuff? You know, because that's never easy to like figure that stuff out. But you always seem to be the guy who knew the answers. You know?
Well, I think I was obsessed. Like, I think that, when I was in high school, I had a choice after high school. It was either go play college football, um, or not. And I kind of chose this other path that I ended up on. And thank God, because I had all sorts of messed up, like a lot of people who played football, had bad head injuries and whatnot. And my heart wasn't in it. I just didn't like it. And I always did it because I was expected to, and I never really found the thing I wanted to do. And the one thing I wanted to do was music. And I'd always been doing it secretly in my bedroom, playing since I was 13, learning, playing to the radio and all that. And so, and sort of when I decided to like just not pursue that path, moved to Sacramento, and within a time, like I had been going to shows like, since I was a teenager in high school, going to Gilman, going to Berkeley Square, going to Slim's, and driving up to the Phoenix Theater, Petaluma, Edge, and Palo Alto. And I think seeing all those shows at that age made me realize that, oh, this is something you can do. It's not just something that people on MTV do. People can do it in this other way, and it's way more accessible. And these folks are having way more fun. And so it was the only thing I can think of, really. And for someone who felt extremely lost for his entire, my entire, like most teenagers, felt lost and aimless, um, and like a disappointment to everyone that cared about me. I just felt like this was the one thing I liked. And so I pursued it as if it was my only chance. Like this was the only thing I could do. And so in a way, like when we first started, we got a van, and the whole premise of, after I met Mel, and me and Mel were just became obsessed with the idea of playing in a band and writing songs together. We'd sleep over each other's houses, just writing all night, and just became best friends. Um, and then eventually found Liz, and then eventually found Ray, and eventually went on our first tour. And after that first little tour, it was a matter of like, hey, if we just kept touring, we wouldn't have to pay rent, kind of a thing. And we just went out and we busted our ass. And I think that a lot of the learning came from observation. I just wanted it more than anything. I just wanted some path for myself. And so I'd go to shows and I'd observe the bands whose place I wanted to be in within a year, or the bands I'd want to be in their place in 5 or in 30. And I would reverse engineer their entire careers. And I'd watch the things they would do, and I'd observe, like, and I'd see what they had in common. Little things like they don't play every month. It seems like they always play at a time where I'm like, God, I would love to see this band again. I haven't seen them in a few months. And the next thing you know, like, oh shit, they're playing. And it was one of the first lessons I observed with the bands who really grew were really spacing out their shows and making a big deal out of the few shows they played, rather than just trying to play a shit ton of shows and not really promoting any of them. And so I used to have spreadsheets and spreadsheets of booking agents, clubs. I would go and look at every band's, I would look at Steve Koepke's list, And every time there was a venue on there that was listed that I didn't know what it was, I would start calling people and start looking it up and finding the information for it. And so I think like part of my own ADHD superpower, which is not so much which is more of an ability to become hyper focused on a thing. I became hyper focused on the how to navigate, and often sometimes getting so overwhelmed by that it would affect my music. Um, but I think in many regards, like the knowledge of the music industry was always something I obsessed in observing the thing as a whole, and kind of understanding and seeing the entire ecosystem was something that I always felt like I was in tune with. Um, and I think, even with Luckie Strike, our first album in the first year, like I would start having young folks and bands start asking me for advice or asking me, and I would just give them. I would give them the entire list of venues, of promoters, everything I had. I would, and I remember I was dating a girl in Sacramento. We moved in together, and then she just got used to somebody with dyed hair knocking on the door, handing me a CD and asking for advice, and I would just always give it. And that was the thing I loved about the punk community back then. It was a community, and you had to give back to it in order to really be a cherished member of it and to be valued. And there was a divide, and I think that we kind of had this road where we wanted this to be our career, but we were very much wanting to give back as much as we humanly could. And what happened is when I moved, funny enough, like when the band ended and I moved up to Seattle, and people started learning, oh, you were in that band, you were in this band, and a lot, and then I'd randomly meet people who knew Luckie Strike and knew who we were, and then that would turn into people asking me for advice. And so what's funny is Artist Home, my company, we produce music festivals. We've been down quite a journey ourselves, just trying to find a place where we could be a good asset for the music community, like make a difference. And we've done that. And even though publicly we produce music festivals, we do a lot, but like, 2-3 times a week, I'm doing consultations with artists, which I've done for now 20 odd years, that, for at least the last 15. How long have I been here? Shit, 13, 14 years.
Something like that. Yeah.
Yeah. So like, so yeah, it's been something that's been a constant in my presence here, and sort of the support and whatnot we get from our festivals, at least from a lot of the artists that play, comes from that place where we're helping them a lot of the time, and we're guiding them. And a lot of the artists that play our festivals, like that conversation and that led to their growth, where they would play the festival, could have been a 3-year-old conversation and plan in place that would help them blow up, putting them in the right spot. So yeah, that understanding and just kind of consistent pursuit of how this whole thing works is just something I obsessed over. And oddly enough, I found myself in a weird place where I am making a living off of music. It is my career, at least not, not in the last year, but it all comes from that, being a kid who was 17, going to shows and trying to figure out, how does this work? And it's still serving me today. So
I think there's a lot of like beauty behind that whole like series of events, like kind of culminating with you, like you just mentioned, eventually having your career involved in music. It's just that it didn't necessarily pan out the way that you had, thought that it might when you'd started it,
yeah.
So I think that's wonderful. I think that's awesome. And just to touch briefly, because I hadn't really formally mentioned it, but your company or your organization is called Artist Home,
Yeah.
which, if memory serves, it started as kind of like this all-encompassing kind of artist management idea, right? Like where you were going to be like this whole package service to bands, right?
Yeah. Like the initial idea that I had was, I was seeing bands it was weird. I would watch bands that would get signed to like say Sub Pop or, some label and whatnot. And there always to be some standoff with the label, hoping that the band would get an agent or a manager, and the agent would be standing off, hoping the band would get a label and all this stuff, and then waiting for this complete package. But I also saw a lot of like in the ways that bands were growing, in the ways that bands were working. I saw a lot of inefficiencies in that, in how you had all these different kind of polar forces working for a band that weren't necessarily in sync. They just represented different, offices, and often parts in different parts of the country. So the initial idea was to create a record label, and the record label would, when you signed a record label, you had the option to be an immediate member of the agency roster, and to have management and licensing, and sync licensing, out there trying to get you money, and all of those things, and try to have that all within one roof, and even having a recording studio so everything was just efficient. And um, my hope was that any band that joined would get that team that they needed, should they need it. So I started as a booking agency. So that's what I'd always done for free and for fun, and for my own band and for a bunch of bands. And Because it was the hardest thing to do, is being a booking agent. So I said, well, this will be the hardest piece of this to actually create. And it went well. I mean, and then the agency grew to a point, but then the whole world of the booking agents mirrored the world of corporate America. And the punk world that I grew up in, you had a lot of boutique agencies where you can like have one person have a business with like 13 or so bands, and they're fine, they're doing great, and there were no real limitations like there are today. And so you had all these small booking agencies that started getting bought up by big conglomerate agencies, and to the point where there's like 4 major agencies in the United States. And for me, it was like I liked my independence, and part of my own dream is like I just don't want to work for anybody. Like I like working for myself. And I kind of ditched the booking agency thing when this opportunity to produce a music festival the first year I lived in Seattle came along. And that music festival is called Dobe Fest. And Dobe Fest was a festival that, it's funny, like I was asked by some friends, they're like, we don't know much about the industry. Can you help us like produce this festival? It's like, sure. Like, and selfishly, like a lot of my own like input on the festivals and whatnot was really geared towards things that I hated about music festivals. It was about addressing those issues and about addressing those things that I thought were really terrible for artists when it came to music festivals. A lot of it came from how much I hated Warped Tour. A lot of it came from like how much I hated these festivals with no soul. They're just buying names, putting them on a poster, and just vomiting them out on a parking lot. But there was no real, it lost any sense of discovery, connectedness, etc. So Dobe Fest became this, I was more inspired by like, I want to put bands on a pedestal that deserve the pedestal that no one's seen before. And I want to help create something that's its reputation. Like too many people are just sitting around waiting to be told what to like. And there's not enough people in this industry sticking their neck out saying, you need to listen to this. And so from a festival standpoint, Dobe Fest became less the place where people went to go see what was familiar. They literally went to go find who the next thing they're going to fall in love with is. And like within a few years, Head in the Heart, that was their first festival they ever played. And that they've credited that to being their launching point to their career. We've had so many bands that have come through in the 14 years that has been around. That all traced back to Dobe Fest, because Dobe Fest became a thing that would sell out in 5 seconds without anyone knowing who was playing, and their support selling this thing out because they understood that it was an experience like no other, meant that I can get more and more obscure and more new. And I'd have bands drive from across the country just to play Dobe Fest, and having never played the West Coast, come back 2 months later and sell out a venue with 400 people.
Wow.
And it became a thing that really changed. I mean, they actually made a movie about it. It's called Welcome to Dobe, and it was on PBS here like every month for like a year. It was very weird. So
No way.
Yeah, I'd be surfing the channels there. My big ass head would be on the, like, ah. So it became a thing, and it was all inspired by punk rock. It was inspired by that DIY, like, have the vision for the thing you love, and have that vision that really serves the community, and create it and push it. And yeah, we bootstrapped that thing, and Artist Home. Then I realized, by producing a music festival, I could have an impact and effect and have relationships with so many more bands than if I was just an agent. And it was so much less work, um, way less heartbreaking. And yeah, so I decided, yeah, like, I don't want to be part of this mega conglomerate booking agency. I'd rather go this other route because I feel like I can make a bigger difference there. And that's what I've been doing since, really.
Yeah, because you have the Dobe Music Festival, and then you also have it's these two seasonal festivals that you do, correct?
Yeah. So Timber Outdoor Music Festival.
Right.
So Dobe Fest, part of what makes Dobe Fest really special is only 1,000 people can buy tickets. And it's
Right.
on an island in the middle of the San Juans. And all the musicians that play typically all stay there the whole weekend. And they'll form bands that weekend and perform. They'll play secret sets up in the woods in a little punk rock yoga studio that feels like a garage show. You really don't know what to expect. Every year it's different. But Timber Outdoor Music Festival, that happens in the summer here in Carnation, and that is Dobe Fest. I get to work with the Dobe Resort and the owner Joe Brotherton, who's created that. Timber Outdoor Music Festival I own with a couple partners of mine, Phil and Chad, and that is 3,000 people at this park, this beautiful park in the woods, and amidst this farmland on a river. And it's kind of just a bigger capacity version, much of the same inspiration, and whatnot, but it's just kind of bigger and involves a lot more things. Like, I think we're very much inspired by, I say I want everyone that comes to Timber Outdoor Music Festival to feel the same way that I would want them to feel as if they're in my backyard having a barbecue. And so it has that vibe where we don't overcapacitate it. There's not a single metal human barrier allowed. Like, there's no VIP bullshit. Everyone's on the same level, and people can. But it's also about celebrating the outdoors too here. Like, so you can be at this music festival, you can enjoy it while literally floating in a river and listening to the bands play. I hire astrophysicists to come in at night to do stargazing. We have painters that come in and do guided painting classes in the morning, nature painting. It's just everything you love about the outdoors. We kind of have it. Kayaking, paddleboarding, all free, all guided. People can sign up for it whatever they want. There's even a 5K at the end of it. And like, so it's just this big celebration of the outdoors in the summer here, which is glorious. And then Timber Winter Music Festival is basically the winter version of that, up in the mountains in the snow in Leavenworth, Washington. And that happens in January.
Got it.
And that is just a big rock and roll party, I think, where we have like a hot toddy garden next to the beer garden. And it's pretty glorious. So we kind of just have those two festivals, kind of celebrating winter and summer, and then Dobe Fest up on Orcas Island.
Yeah, and Leavenworth is a really rad little town up there. Like, if anyone hasn't been there, yeah, it's got like this like Bavarian kind of theme with amongst like the mountains of the region, and it almost feels like you're in like the German Alps or something like that.
Yeah, because you're way up in elevation in the Cascade Mountains, and everything has a Bavarian theme. All the architecture, everything, the food, the sounds as you walk around, and it's just like Christmas lights everywhere. And it's really pretty unique. So it's pretty great.
Yeah. I'm hoping to be able to bring my wife up there to do. I'd love to go to that festival in particular because like I'm tickled by Leavenworth. I think that town is so fun and so funky. But I'd love to come to Timber or Dobe one of these years.
Yeah, Timber Winter will be the last weekend of July, or sorry, January. The last weekend of January this year or next year. And that'll be our first festival that we've been able to produce in 2 years. So
that'll be our first step, yeah, out of the pandemic world.
That's great. I did want to ask, so, with you having these three major festivals that you handle, approximately like how much planning, like in terms of like the length of time goes into each one of them? Would you say it's like 4 months each or like 6 months each or?
I mean, it just depends on what aspect of it. I would say production, which is just, everything from power to sanitation to, etc., water. Um, that's probably about a 6 month thing, maybe a 4 to 6 months. But I work on it from, where my focus is on the talent buying, is on the booking, the programming, and all the marketing and whatnot, and getting the word out and the messaging. So it's really year round. Like, we're not even in July of this year, and I'm already working on July of next year.
Wow.
Um, and a lot of that is conceptual. Like, the last thing I want my festivals to be is kind of what festivals have turned into, which is just big font to small font, AEG or Live Nation. Here's a bunch of names and no soul. Like, and for me, it's always about finding the inspiration to be the counter to that. How do you have people come to a thing and have them walk away being like, that was a really meaningful time. Like, I really connected with folks. I think the first hashtag we ever had for Timber Outdoor was turn your fucking phone off. I don't want you taking pictures and tagging us and doing this. I want you to just be with your friends and be with your neighbors and watch this music, enjoy it, And it's funny because it really came across. Like, there was just, and I just, yeah, like, for me, it's about creating things that people connect. And I mean, as cheesy as it sounds, like, I love the idea of spending my life working on things that give people memories that they'll take with them to the grave. Like, that to me is a life well lived. Like, I will, it's worth every amount of stress and anxiety those things give me. But it's, I get to do that for a living. And that's my inspiration. And that's kind of cool when I sit back and think about it at the end of every festival, when I'm taking a deep breath and I'm just watching the glow on people's faces. And, oh my God, this is a pretty good life. This is pretty good, that I landed here somehow. And that all my experience going back to that, being the 13-year-old kid who asked my friend if I can have a guitar that was collecting dust in his basement, like, all goes back to that. And it's pretty neat.
That is awesome. Yeah, I love when you can capture those moments of time. Like, I know that recently, well, I wouldn't say recently anymore, but one of the more recent shows that I went to, prior to the pandemic, obviously, where I noticed one of those moments was, I went and saw the band Hot Water Music.
Yeah.
And Chuck Reagan, who's got such like a uniquely, interesting, like, gravelly voice, and he's such a strong presence, as not only a member of that band, but as a solo artist. And there were a few songs during that set where he did a solo thing, and man, like, he started singing this one song, and literally all eyes and ears were on him, and
Yeah.
there was not a phone in sight. It was beautiful. I was like, that's what I
Yeah.
want to see more often. Yeah.
That's the thing, like, too, like, the biggest pressure for me isn't finding headliners. It's finding a band that, because, like, there's something about falling in love with a band for the first time and seeing that band. And that's been like our thing. Like, and that's been my thing. Like, and in creating those, I mean, it's just those moments that are just timeless, like, we'd create secret shows where people are like literally performing on a treehouse, and we just spread rumors, and then everyone's like, oh, you're supposed to go underneath this treehouse at midnight. So everyone, then there's 1,000 people below this treehouse all looking up, being like, what the hell is going to happen? And the next thing you know, some unknown but absolutely insane artist gets up there and performs and has people weeping or just smiling ear to ear, and those kind of things. And so it's just, you can't put that on a poster, but you can do it. And then friends tell their other friends about it. It's like, yeah, you can go to, dude, you got to come to this thing. It's hard to explain. Just come. Things are going to happen, and they're going to surprise you. I don't even know it's going to happen. It's going to happen. And like, and that's the beauty of it all. Like, the things that happen on the stage are exceptional. They're great. I mean, I wouldn't program if I didn't feel that way, but the things that happen off the stage, and the surprise moments that we put a lot of work into, those are the things that are just, of all the memories I've had in, 12 plus years of doing music festivals, it's all those moments that stand out the most to me. And when I talk to people that go religiously, like that's really all they talk about.
I think that's awesome, man.
Yeah.
I know that you and I have spoken a little bit, over the years about just like, and you've touched on it briefly here today, like just, being in the Pacific Northwest and how that's kind of helped drive, some of this inspiration for what the work that you're doing. Um, and, I'll let you kind of chime in on this, but, there has been for the last 3 or 4 decades, just been like this wealth of amazing talent, amazing music, and amazing art coming from that area. I mean, like, KEXP is like, I know that you've gone on record and said it's like the greatest radio station in the world. And like, I would hard second that in a
Yeah.
minute. It's such a good programming that they have set up there.
Yeah.
I mean, what do you think is it about that area that's really like kind of driving a lot of this awesome work and art that's coming out?
I think it has everything California lost. I think that when I went back to California to finish a music degree and finish studying, and I quickly realized that I looked around and there were no musicians left really. There weren't many. And there were no new ones really forming. And the venues that they had played in and the scene that fostered people like me and you was really diminished, because you turned into a thing where you had to nearly be a millionaire just in order to be average there and get by. And I just saw as like a place where, like, personally, if I ever wanted to do anything in music, at least to the degree that I wanted to do it in, I wasn't allowed to live there anymore. And so I moved back to Seattle because in my short stint initially living here, every neighborhood had a music venue. KXP existed. There were people writing about music. There was actual music journalism here. It's insane. And people could afford to live here. It's getting bad here. It's getting a lot of the same forces that drove people out of the Bay Area have come here. And but they were able to lay enough of a foundation that we can at least fight. And the thing that the Pacific Northwest has is just an abundance of a community. And it truly is a community. You have booking agents from what would be considered rival venues in other markets, but they're all best friends. In times where I book venues, which I have on and off my own time here, like, I literally have conversations every week with the other agents of every place, and we all kind of work together. And there's this weird working together that people have here that reminded me of the punk scene, where even though it was like so much a foundation of what happened here was built on grunge, grunge happened because there was a community behind it, and it was a community, which I later realized. I wasn't here when grunge happened. I was, but meeting the people that were here and were a part of it, you get that sense that, like, no one was trying to do anything but just love music and love the people who made it. That's it. And if they weren't the ones making it, they were putting on the shows, or they're running the venues, they're writing for the Rocket, or the Stranger after that, or donating to KXP and supporting literally the best radio station on the planet, which is a major pillar of what happens up here. But I'll say, like, within 3 years of living up here, I was full-time working on my music business that I created, much in part because I moved into a community that took part and allowed somebody like me to move here and made it affordable for me to live here and made it affordable for musicians to live here. And it's weird. Like, I'm on Zoom calls with the mayor's office, and when the pandemic hit, like, all the venues bound together, and I was a part of that to, like, fight for funding and making sure that they survived the pandemic, because if they didn't, then our primary source of income for working musicians would have gone. And we're the first county in the nation that awarded money to venues, to independently owned music venues. This first governmental body that awarded money to independent music venues in the nation. And when that happened, that turned into NIVA, the National Independent Venue Association, which got a bill passed in Congress, Save Our Stages Act, which made that happen nationwide. That all, really the blueprint of that all happened here in the Pacific Northwest, in King County, Seattle's county. And so yeah, it's insane. Like it's an exceptional place to live. You're always gonna have people that are bitter because they're not as popular you want to be or whatever. That's the nature of the game. But I fully believe in the music that comes out of here in Portland and Vancouver and Bellingham, you know, all over. It's rich.
Yeah, that's killer. I've always been infatuated with the Pacific Northwest, and I mean, there was even a hot minute there where I almost moved up there, and like, you know, I sometimes regret not doing it, but at the same time, it's, you know, it's a great place to visit, and like you said, it's just budding with a ton of talent. And I mean, you've turned me on to a bunch of really good artists, like Deep Sea Diver. You know, I first heard
Yeah,
about them from you. They're incredible, just incredible.
I know they played. I think they moved up here from LA, and I think
Wow.
we were one of the first festivals to book them. And now, like, I think they just announced a tour with Death Cab for Cutie that they're going out on. They just, before the pandemic, they finished a tour with Wilco, but they like the #1 selling album up here right at the middle of the pandemic. Their new album is massive. It's just gone. They're one of the few bands during the pandemic that I saw explode.
Yeah.
But yeah, Deep Sea Diver are exceptional. I mean, Kelly Schaefer is probably my favorite artist of generations, and Ryan Lynch, the insane guitar player we talked about, plays guitar for her. I book entire festivals based on these artists in the Northwest, and it's yeah, I wouldn't trade it for shit. I love it. I love the scene here.
That's killer.
Yeah, and if there's any musicians that are wondering where to set up shop and do stuff, I'll tell you, it's not a scene, it's a community. It's a thing that you can gain access to. Like, and it's incredible that there are forums that would happen. I mean, this is all non-pandemic, but they would have educational forums on the weekends where any musician can go, and there'd be panels of people talking about the music business. This is just a Saturday, and this is that in KEXP's gathering space, free. And that kind of thing would happen constantly and would be packed full of musicians trying to navigate and understand how things work. And like was honored to be asked to be a few of them, to give lectures at one of the local venues that did these lecture series. So if you're a musician or professional just thinking of doing it, like, it's a great place where you can get out of the gate and also be in a place where you can ask questions, make mistakes, be corrected, like, and you know, you'll kind of be judged on how much you give back, you know, not just what you take. And if that's kind of your jam, I tell anyone move to Pacific Northwest.
Um, yeah. So I wanted to actually ask you, I mean, obviously right now bands and artists are having to try a lot of different things, and we're slowly kind of getting back to the point where shows are going to happen. But, what are some of, like, I guess some of the, quote unquote mistakes that you've seen a lot of bands making prior to the pandemic that you are hoping that they might get away from once we start kind of getting things back going?
Well, it's weird. The biggest mistake I've seen since I started really paying attention at the age of 17, I'm now 44. It's just the biggest mistake is overplaying, playing too goddamn much. And I try to use this analogy, like absence makes the heart go fonder, doesn't just apply to relationships. It applies to everything humans consume. Like, there's a reason you don't eat your favorite meal every single day of your life. There's a reason why you don't watch your favorite movie every month or every week of your life. Like, with every musician, there comes a certain level of narcissism where they think they're fucking geniuses and everything. And of course they are. But even the most genius thing in the world people don't want to listen to and be a part of every day and constantly. And so it's important that musicians like Beyonce could afford to have people write and put out an album every month. She doesn't for a reason. And it's funny, like I tell artists all the time, if you pay attention, the more successful an artist is, the less they do. And the bigger hammer they swing when they do it. Like recently with Anderson .Paak and Bruno Mars. And they're insane release, but there's an interview, like the first interview they gave, Anderson, like it was like Bruno Mars was coaching Anderson, had to tell him, you are so not allowed to leak this and just play it for anyone. You have to keep this under wraps. And like this whole coaching about pulling the reins back and doing it right and doing it in a big way rather than overdoing it. And that goes for a local band that could, if you could draw 25 people, you need to think about spacing out your damn shows because you want to guarantee, you want that audience to grow, and all you do is plateau and burn that audience out if you're trying to get them to come to a show every month. And the reason I mention that mistake is because it's one that I feel that the pandemic may have made worse, where a lot of artists have taken to virtual shows, which honestly are kind of a bummer. But they don't realize that when they play a virtual show, it's not like they're playing in one town and one market. They're actually playing to the world.
Right.
And you could totally oversaturate and overplay doing that. And I worry that people's minds, like artists' minds, go to being a social media success and not an actual live band success without understanding that being a successful live band and doing those things, getting out, hitting the road, touring, playing places, developing yourselves in other markets. I mean, I hate to get all businessy, but that just actually makes that other thing that you're pursuing, whether it's social media, followers, blah, 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 more successful. But if you just try to stay at home and be, you know, Taylor Swift or Billie Eilish and just have this thing where you're just trying to be massive on social media and you think that's your way to success, you're hamstringing yourself. You're just giving yourself less opportunities to become a success. I did a lecture I did was on sustainable touring, sustainable living through touring. And it was just about how to earn a living and how to develop strategies in touring and whatnot. And it's funny, and I don't know if it's like this here or most anywhere, but it's weird in Seattle, where Seattle, when you talk to a lot of local artists, their idea of like where they're getting big, where they measure their success, it stops at Seattle's borders. I've seen it more here than anywhere I've ever been, where they just think about the city and they don't think about other places. And so when I did this lecture, I tried to tell them, I said, like, artist pay hasn't really gone up in a long time. So touring isn't as sustainable as it used to be because it costs more. But I was like, there are 56 different markets within a 13-hour drive of where you live here in Seattle. And there are 164 Fridays, Saturdays, and days before holidays that happened last year that you could have taken advantage of those places without touring. You could have went and toured and been home and back to work by Monday. And I drew this map of the US and I highlighted everywhere in green that they could have went to, and it was shocked people. And I was like, this shouldn't be shocking. Like, so few bands are doing it this way that the few that are succeeding because you're not giving them any competition.
Right.
So, and it's sort of like a thing where, like, even when like we were doing our thing in the late 90s, like it's the equivalent of like Black Flag, and Henry Rollins getting the van and that story and those lessons that they showed. Like, we're like, yeah, like we learned from those lessons and they're still as viable today as they were then. And so few bands do it that way, and so few, but the few that do succeed. It's insane. So much more so than say like our generation. It's because so few bands are willing to do it, and they see things through the scope of social media and not through doing those other things. Just expands your audience, makes you more money, and you could still do as much, if not more valuable, social media shit, so That would be my advice: is read that book and get the fuck out on the road and go
Yeah.
play. You know.
Yeah, I think that's a really I honestly think that is like the most valuable thing that a band could consider anymore. And it's interesting that you talk about the fact that it translates to the social media aspect of it too, because as somebody who I do my label and I do this podcast, and then I've got my affiliation with Tsunami Bomb right now, playing with them. And you have to maintain some kind of a presence online,
Yeah.
but there really are no rules to it. Like, you don't have to post something every day. You don't have to do stuff that solicits engagement from your audience. For the most part, if you're in a band and you've already got an audience that's following you on social media, they're probably going to continue to follow you 5 months from now if you only post a couple times a month.
Yeah, and not to mention connecting with them is super cheap.
Mm-hmm.
Like, it's really cheap to, I mean, and I know people don't want to give money here or there or whatever, but when people like poo-poo, like, spending advertising on Facebook, like I'm like, do you know how much money it costs to put up posters around town for all the
Lot.
DIY punks that talk about, it costs a lot of money to do that. It costs a lot of time. But you know how much it costs to reach like 5,000 people on Facebook? $10.
Yeah.
So, and it's weird, but yeah, the other thing I would tell artists is, like, you don't have to have 10 Insta stories a day. Just have the things that you do be meaningful. And unless they are meaningful at any time, don't just post to post. It's the same rule as don't play a show ever just to play a show.
Right.
I tell bands all the time, like, if you want a real lesson, like, if you're trying to grow, and one, there's no right answer in terms of like what someone's trying to achieve, which every time I have a consultation with a band, that's the first question I ask is, what do you want to achieve? And there are no wrong answers, but they will guide like my answer, because it has to be what's right for you. But for any band that's trying to make a living or trying to be, have some sort of sustainable existence, that I would always say, like, don't play a show just to play a show. That show has to count for something beyond that show, beyond that day, whether it's, and the fundamental question I always say you have to be able to answer is, does that show put you in front of people who've never seen you before?
Right.
That's the number one rule. Number two, use that, I mean, I can go on and on about show trades, using your draw or whatever. But the same thing goes for social media. It's like, don't post unless you have something valuable, like, give people something valuable to see, because like, you can overdo it in that regard as well. And then people, you're just white noise in their feed and they're not really paying much attention. But if you say something that matters when you say it, all eyes are on you. People pay attention, and if you're just yourself, and I don't know, but like, playing out of town, doing those shows and whatnot, gives you something to talk about, gives you something to show, you know?
Yeah, I think the authenticity factor really makes all the difference in the world. As long as you're authentic, honest, and you have something that provides value,
Yeah.
then those are what counts. Yeah.
Yeah. Look at Dan Rather's Twitter, you know? Smart man.
He is. Yeah. I read his posts all the time.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, Kevin, I did have one question before I jump into my last two questions for you.
Yeah.
And I know that you and I have talked about this, but I think other people might be interested. Is there any chance of Luckie Strike either doing anything new, or like releasing stuff that may have not been released, or possibly doing a reunion at some point?
Yeah, actually.
Okay.
We've never released our music through streaming. There's one album that's available on streaming, and it's up there, we feel, illegally right now. So we had to file complaints to try to get it taken down. It's been an on and off process for a long time of never hearing back from the Spotify's and the iTunes of the world, but we're still pursuing that. And we kind of never put our albums on streaming for a couple of reasons. One is because we had lived in a world where selling our albums made us a really good living, and seeing how the music industry just kind of cowered to this other platform to make shit, taking away like the livelihoods of the musicians who now don't even realize what, if they had collectively valued their craft, what they could have made. And so like I just never felt right. That's why Indian Valley Line's only on Bandcamp. That's why my solo album's only on Bandcamp. It's because I just can't, I couldn't stomach it for a long time. But we decided that we're gonna upload the entire Luckie Strike catalog, including a bunch of unreleased stuff, which is actually the best stuff we ever did. And all the money that people spend on it, whether if they buy the album or stream it, it's all going to go directly into cancer research.
Awesome.
So Liz is setting that up, and that's hopefully going to happen, sometime this year. The unreleased tracks are, I think you may have gotten them, but like I burned a bunch of CDs on an old CD burner at the very end of Luckie Strike, and I gave away like 400 of these CDs. But they're the last things we recorded, and honestly the best things we ever did. And it breaks my heart because I was like, yeah, this was the precursor of a great album that we knew was coming and then we had but never saw the light of day. So some of that got recorded. So yeah, that's our hope. In terms of ever playing again, it comes up every once in a while. We chat all the time. Like Luckie Strike was the greatest thing ever. In the end, like, yeah, like the goals we set didn't really happen. And I feel a lot of those reasons were out of our control, to be honest. Kind of got fucked over by a lot of people in the industry and sort of taken advantage of, I think, to be honest. We deserved a lot more than we got. But in the end, like, we're family all these years later. We're so freaking close. And to me, like, that is the ultimate success. And we're happy and we love each other. And when we talk about, man, I think we were serious about getting together and playing a show a few years ago. And my rule is like, I don't want to be one of these bands that gets back together after so many years, gets on a stage and just sucks.
Right.
And we just started pulling up footage, like Liz and an old fan posted a video, because we were around in this time where people weren't videotaping everything. An old fan posted a video and I was like, oh shit. And it was scary because like I remember how good we were and how much work we put into what we did. And I watched it, I was like, yeah, we were really fucking great. And Liz found a video, she just digitized it and uploaded it. But it like also gave credence to this thing where I didn't want to be reunite and suck. I mean, I listened to some of the guitar stuff that I did, and I'm like, I don't think I could do that anymore. And I watched, and like, I don't want to put on a shitty show. And I think like what's cool is there's so many Luckie Strike fans out there that have connected and found us in different ways. But I love the fact that we live in people's memories and that people have this connection with who we were and what we did, because what we did, I don't think we could have put any more into. And how fine-tuned and how dialed in and how connected we were as a band. That took years and years and years of work. And so the whole thing about reuniting is we talk about it and we're all kind of willing to do it, but we're all intimidated by our past selves because we don't want to go out there. And I think the one thing that we really felt was that we had pure joy on stage. We were purely connected on stage. We performed unconscious, and you performed with us a few times. You filled in with bass a few times. And yeah, like I just, I like the fact of, I like who we were at that time. And I like that exists in people's minds that saw us and appreciated what we did. I think a Luckie Strike reunion show could happen. I think the thing that I always put out there is we need a lot of rehearsing if it's ever going to happen. And that's the part that kind of trips everybody up because we're all spread out now and, have responsibilities and stuff, and dedicating a couple months of our lives, which is probably what it would take, is a hard thing. So, yeah. I mean, I miss them. I would give anything to get on a stage and be able to do what we did. And every one of them would say the same thing. Anything. Like, I love them. Like, to the day I die, that's going to be a family that I'm just like, that's a huge part of my life. And I experienced something that I can never put into words with other people. And I mean, being in that band with those three human beings was just like the most rewarding thing. It's fucking great.
Yeah, absolutely. There really is something special about being in a band, and especially a band like you guys. I mean, you guys were road dogs, man. Like, you guys were constantly on the road,
Yeah.
constantly doing stuff, and yeah, I think that just kind of adds to that, like, cohesion amongst the people within the band. And I mean, I could certainly feel it. I remember, like, hanging out with you guys, like when I was just playing shows with you guys. Like, you could just tell, like, you guys were so tight as individuals and as friends, like really truly a family.
Yeah, we suffered a lot together.
Mhm.
And I think that's really what happened is we did go out there with nothing, and had to figure it out and had to make a lot of shit work. And we've talked about it often about how in life, like, we've encountered problems or challenges that seemed like nothing, but everyone will look at us like some miracle workers, and we all trace that back to being in that band and being in a town without enough gas money to get to the next town. And how do we figure it out? How do we make that happen? Like, those real, what felt like life and death scenarios that we worked our way out of time and time again, and those real struggles, those personal struggles that we were dealing with together, helping each other through, the difficulty that we experienced. There's just no emulating that, and it's made us tough as fuck, and it's made us go into life like, with a chip on our shoulders and a confidence that we can do anything, because we sure did a lot.
Yeah, you surely did. You should be really proud, man. Like, I
Yeah.
think you guys were one of the best out of that whole, like, area, and that whole era. We were all like kind of a this community of bands, and everyone was trying to help each other out a little bit. But yeah, I think you guys were one of the greats. So, for what it's worth.
Yeah. Thank you, man. Yeah, and you're not blowing smoke too. I know you mean it. So
No, man, I wouldn't have said that if I didn't mean it, dude.
no, I know you, man. I appreciate it. I mean, that's enough. I mean, it's totally yeah. I mean, I'm not, I think our first record, I'm a little embarrassed when I was 17, and it's a lot of studio mistakes. But honestly, every show we ever did, everything we ever did, I have zero regrets. I'm proud of every minute, and they feel the same way.
Well, cool. I've got a couple of questions that I like to throw every guest. And the first one is one that I'm sure you'll have a ton of great suggestions for. But who are some artists that you think need to be on people's radar right now?
This is a hard one. And I didn't prepare for this question. I just figured I'd wing it since
Okay.
I'm gonna do it all. There's a group. I'm actually going to mention a couple record labels too.
Okay. Yeah.
Because you're doing really great work. I noticed a couple places that seem to be. One of them is called Mama Bird Recording Company. It's in Portland, and Vince, who's the guy who curates that record label, seems like every band he releases is exceptional, but then also like every band like suddenly kind of blows up. Weird. But if I can name a couple things that'll just give people a family of stuff to look at. Mama Bird, and then Coal Mine Records. I think it's in Ohio, a great soul label that's also blown up. But music-wise, I'll say Delvin Lamar Organ Trio, who, if you're into the meters and you're into that old soul, that New Orleans style soul, they're a band from Seattle that I'm proud to say I booked on their first festival and helped them through in their beginnings. That band is just beautiful Hammond B3s, just lush soul guitar and great drummer. Really cool stuff. If you're ever DJing a party and you just need some secret sauce to just throw in there, Delvin Lamar Organ Trio are great. Kelly Schaefer, who I know has been on a little bit of a break due to different things, and I know will be coming out of it and doing a new album. Kelly Schaefer is one of the best artists of our generation. She is well, not our generation. She's younger, but she's a modern day Patti Smith. And there's something about her where her choices remind me of Billie Holiday sometimes, and then Patti Smith another time. And it seems like whenever there's a path in the road musically to make a decision, she takes what would seem like the scarier one, but lands flawlessly and brutally real and brutally honest in her words. And I just think it's one of the best living musicians, period. I've been listening to, I mean, Shabazz Palaces never ceases to amaze me. Deep Sea Diver, who we mentioned before, so like just one of my favorite bands, period. I really want to think of some like, gosh, this is tough because this is what I do, and I agonize over this. Years ago, a guy named Vikesh Kapoor released one of those albums on Mama Bird, and it's called The Ballad of Willie Robbins, and it is one of the saddest, most heartbreaking albums I've ever heard. And it's just really done. So I think a lot of it was inspired by his own father, who was like a coal miner. And just that state of blue collar existence and being like a cog in a big machine. Incredible work. I think he actually performed for Noam Chomsky and like is seen as this kind of revolutionary songwriter. He hasn't released anything in a long time, but that is one of the best albums I've heard in a while. Up here, there's a band called the Black Ends that I'm really into. I don't know, like, gosh, there's so much. I don't know. We write about it, artisthome.org. Like we do a lot of music premieres and things too. And so there's a lot of music there you can hear.
Sure, we could leave I can obviously leave links for everyone that you've named, and then we can just leave a link for Artist Home, at that end. But
I'm going to mention one more band, Mr. Sam and the People People. Nobody knows them. They're down in New Orleans. It's my buddy Sam Gelband, released an EP with his girlfriend Casey Jane. He was in this exceptional band called Sons of Rainier, who are another unreal band. Like, if you ever like want to fall asleep at a campfire in the Arizona desert and have 4 people singing harmonies to lull you, to kind of put you to sleep or tell you stories, like, that's Sons of Rainier. Mr. Sam and the People, one of my favorite EPs, and it's just this EP. I think it's like 5 or 6 songs, but it's just purely joy. Band from the Shut Ups from there in the Bay Area. So good. Good.
Yeah.
And, I don't know. I could keep going. I could go on for hours, but I'll leave it at that.
We could do another episode where this is all we talk about.
I know. If sync licensing was easier for podcasts, that would be so cool because we could just listen to music.
Totally.
The Shivas. I think you would like them.
The Shivas or Shibas?
The Shivas. Shivas.
Oh, okay, got it. Nice. Yeah, I'll check them out. Yeah.
Check them out. They have a perfect catalog, like everything.
A perfect catalog. Okay.
Perfect catalog.
Well, that's a tall descriptor. I'll make sure to call you on that.
Yeah.
I'll check them out. No, Shut Ups is a band that has been named once before by the band Decent Criminal. Kelly Schaefer, 100%. Like, Kelly's awesome. Yeah. Shabazz Palaces too. They're from Seattle, right?
Yeah. It's oh God, can't believe I'm forgetting his name. Diggable Planets. Anyway.
Yeah.
Sorry.
That's tight.
Yeah.
Thank you for that list.
Ishmael Butler from Diggable Planets is him, and Tendai Marine, who's another great musician. But it's like hip hop 20 years from now.
So it's like space hip hop.
It's thing I really love about it, and kind of what I think they labeled as the Black Weirdo movement up here, which was happening with Dissatisfaction, which was another great hip hop group. And now you got Stas the Boss and Sassy Black, who are the two MCs in Dissatisfaction. But there's just this stream of consciousness hip hop, is what I call it. And it's sort of this antithesis to the ego that kind of dominates hip hop, where it's like, look at me, everything's about me. It's the opposite. It's about the universe. It's about all these, and it's just, yeah, stream of consciousness. Lots of metaphor and simile, lots of things that make you wonder, like this beautiful poetry that makes you interpret what they're saying in your own way and never being told exactly what it is. And I love that about words. And I love that about Shabazz Palaces. I always think like they're hip hop 20 years from now, you know, like the world's got to catch up. You know, it's going to be a while, you know.
That's awesome. Well, thank you for that. My last question for you, which I know people either love this or they hate it. If you had to pick 5 albums that would be the only albums you could listen to for the rest of your life, what would they be?
I hated this and then I loved it. And I'm going to be very selfish in my picks.
Okay.
I realized, like, if I were really on a deserted island, like the albums that I'm going to want to hear are the ones that I feel connected to, that are going to remind me of friends, and that are going to make me think of the loved ones that I made that music with, or that I knew, or that were part of my culture. So it's like a little bit all of that. But the number one would be the musician who's responsible for the Hawaiian Renaissance. I'm a native Hawaiian, and his music was sort of the rebirth of Hawaiian music that was kind of put to shame and shunned and pretty much banned with colonization. His name's Gabi Pahinui, and he has a self-titled album just called Gabi. It came out in the 60s that helped Hawaiians refine their language and refine their music. And he's sort of this hero of the Hawaiian people. And anytime I listen to Hawaiian music, traditional Hawaiian music, like, I feel connected to my ancestors. I feel connected to that. And so I would always need some of that with me. The second album is one of my favorite albums of all time. And it's a local band from up here called the Moondoggies. And they have an album called Don't Be a Stranger, which came out in 2008. To me, I listened to it then and was like, this is one of the best albums I've ever heard. And it's literally, given its genre, like I would put it up there with like Creedence Clearwater's greatest hits, not just any Creedence, their greatest hits. Like this album is a bunch of greatest hits. And then I became very dear friends with them. Like they're the people like humans I can call and ask, you know, tell them I'm in trouble and they'll be there for me, kind of people, and just sort of represent the community up here that has been a part of my life. So like listening to that record, one, it's just the best. Like even on musical merit, I would listen to it. But on the other thing, it just reminded me of all my friends here. Because so many summers were spent listening to that record and enjoying it. I would do the last record with the unreleased tracks with Luckie Strike, because it would just made me think of and imagine Liz, Mel, and Dre every time I hear them play. And selfishly, my solo record that I did with the composer Andrew Jocelyn up here, because I love Andrew Jocelyn. He's a musician, composer, arranger up here. He's a freaking legend. And the engineer who produced it, Gary Mula. And I can hear their choices in that music, but also like half the songs were Indian Valley Line songs, which we scored to, and we create string arrangements for and re-envisioned. So I'd also get to hear my old buddies, Brian Lynch and Emo Ben. So, and the last one has no personal connection, but it's Miles Davis Kind of Blue, because it's the perfect album and I think the greatest American masterwork ever made. So those are my albums.
I love it. I knew you'd come in swinging with those. Those are all wonderful choices, and I think I love that you added like a personal touch to it. Yeah, because it's such a hard thing especially if you just love music, you know, if you just live and breathe it.
Well,
Like,
I went,
how can you possibly answer that question? You know?
yeah, and like what I listen to is all over the place.
Mhm.
And that's the other thing. Like I'm not someone who's really can be narrowed down to even like American popular music. Like
Right.
I studied opera. I grew up listening to Italian opera and Motown with my dad and jazz and like folk music and everything. Like, and so I did first approach it with like, well, shit, I need Verdi or Puccini. Am I going to do Verdi or Puccini? I'm going to need, but then I also need Duke Ellington, blah, blah, blah. And so I was like going through like, I can only pick 5 genres. Shit. And then I was like, no, I'm going to pick the things that I personally feel are going to make me feel that I'm with those people. And then Miles Davis.
Yeah. No, kind of blue is just, you're so spot on. I mean, that's easily in my top 5 too. Like as far as like an album that I would want to be able to hear at any given time, because I agree with you. I think it's a flawless record. Like
Yeah.
it's beautiful. It's just, yeah.
I mean, it's funny. Like I do this Facebook bracket tournaments.
Mm-hmm.
People don't know I host silly ass bracket tournaments on my Facebook feed, and hundreds of people chime in. We've done like the greatest sidekick of all time, the greatest duo, best fictional death,
Mm-hmm.
greatest American creation, these kind of things. And as an example, like greatest American creation, you had the national parks versus the birth control bill, stuff like that. I've always wanted to do one that was like either the greatest American masterwork, but a lot of people just don't understand what that word masterwork means in how it's a very specific context, like magnum opus. It means a life's work, a grand work, you know. You can't just put your favorite record on there. But like Miles Davis would be pretty high on my personal list,
Mm-hmm.
you know, next to like I don't know, like yeah, like Adventures of Huckleberry Finn,
Mm.
you know, Walt Whitman's Leaves of Grass, you know, and then you got the Chrysler Building or the Golden Gate, you know, like those kind of things. It's a fun, nerdy conversation, but it'd be fun to like just be like, what's the best American musical masterwork? Would it be like Gershwin, Rhapsody in Blue? You got Appalachian Spring. You got Miles Davis, Kind of Blue. I also think Duke Ellington's Indigo should count.
Love Supreme. Yeah.
Love Supreme. I'd put Refuse's Shape of Punk to Come on there myself.
Yeah. I mean, they're Swedish, but you know.
Oh yeah, we're talking American. I said American, didn't I?
But if we're doing international though, I hard agree with you. Like that.
Yeah, if we're doing like popular records, I guess record format. I don't know. It's a fun thing to contemplate and nerd out about. I mean, this is why Emo Ben and I would stay up all night driving to the. This is all we talk about.
Totally.
Yeah.
No, I love those bracket tournaments. I'm sorry that I haven't really partaken in the last few. I was a little bogged down with work and I just couldn't really distract from it. But
don't worry about it. They're silly. The next one I think is going to be greatest compilation soundtrack.
Oh, awesome.
Yeah.
Okay, I'll have to get on that one, but because I have thoughts, I have ideas for that one. But
yeah, it'll be cool.
Well, my friend Kevin, it's been wonderful catching up with you. I love you, man, and I miss you dearly. And I really do hope to see you in real life before too long. You know what? I'm almost vaccinated. My wife's almost vaccinated. We really want to take a trip up to Seattle, so I will let you know ahead of time. So hopefully we can facilitate that. But please go check out Artist Home. I'll leave a link. Please go check out Indian Melody Lines music. I'll leave a link for that. Please check out Luckie Strike where you can find them. I think there is video on YouTube right now, and there is a little bit of music on streaming, but we will have that out there on streaming soon.
Yeah. Emo Ben operates our Facebook page. We don't even operate stuff. But we will be releasing our entire catalog streaming, and 100% of everything is just going to go directly into a cancer fund. So yeah, expect that this year.
That's awesome. And definitely be sure to check out what Artist Home is doing with all the festivals that we talked about. If you're in the area or you want to go to the area, partake if you can. They do sell out very fast, like he mentioned, so don't hesitate. Kevin, I'll talk to you real soon. Thank you so much.
All right, thanks, buddy.
Have fun tonight and be careful, okay?
I will,
be a good
Grandma.
boy.
I will.
That's how the story goes. I guess for us, that's how the story goes. I guess for us, that's